The point is that there's some games you don't get to play unless you're all in.
Today I want to talk about one of my favorite Jordan Peterson quotes.
It's the choice of what game you're going to play. The answer, in some sense, to the tragedy of life, to the catastrophe of life, to the fall, is to adopt the responsibility of mortality that goes along with that, and to play that game maximally. And paradoxically, it's in the willingness to do that that the solution emerges.
So I think it's very important that we talk about what Dr. Peterson means when he talks about things as a game. Dr. Peterson often talks in metaphors, because if you think about it, this is probably the most effective way to communicate to as many people as possible. And why? So if you think about somebody walking, you don't think about their tendons moving, you don't think about their legs and the shoes they're wearing. You think about the fact that their legs are propelling them forward at a particular speed that would be a differential between walking and running, or a different form between walking and running. The point is, we don't think about every little detail. We think of things in generalizations, and that helps us process. It's an important thing that our brains are wired for, because we can't process every little detail. Our brains would overload. We'd have heads the size of, bowling balls or basketballs. My head's practically that big anyways, and our whole lives would be spent consuming calories to feed our brain. Our brains can't do that, right? So when he talks about things as a game, he's talking in a sense to offer us a framework for things, right? So in a game, you are a participant generally, or sometimes you're an observer, but generally in a game, there are goals and there are rules. And the rules of the game are not meant necessarily to limit the game, right? And now we have to remember, we're talking in a broad context about rules, right? But as it being a game is helpful because it incorporates us and it incorporates goals. So we have goals in the game. There's a purpose in the game. The rules of the game, and I think this is a very important thing to note, the rules of the game can actually accentuate things, can actually give things more importance. And you're probably thinking, how can rules make things bigger, right? How can rules make something more important? Well, rules make things more important because they oftentimes accentuate the purpose or exaggerate the purpose of the game. So what does that mean? Well, imagine you're playing chess. Now imagine that we take the rules away. What are you playing now? You're playing effectively nothing. Without rules, you are just doing, I can't even define it. Entropy, make-believe, randomness. Rules accentuate things and can sometimes give them purpose.
Life is suffering. Right. Indisputable.
So when Dr. Peterson says things like, life is suffering, a lot of people can turn off to that. People turn off because it's a very hard thing to hear. And things are only hard to hear when people know that something about it is true. It's important to keep listening because he not only offers you a question, but he also offers you a potential solution. And what does he mean specifically, directly, when he says that life is suffering? Well, let me just, again, show you a couple of examples, right? First off, what if you're an individual who has a child that dies very young? Right? What you suffered and that child suffered. What if you are an individual in a coal mine in Africa, right? What if you're extremely rich and you've never had a day in your life of suffering? Guess what? You're gonna die too. So I think there's sort of a maxim or an ultimate truth in life that no matter who you are and what you do, there's gonna be a time in life where you're gonna be brought utterly to your knees. We all share the commonality that every single one of us is gonna suffer and have extreme tragedy in our lives.
What do you do about that? You voluntarily accept it and then strive to overcome the suffering that's a consequence of that. And you do that for you, and you do that in a way that makes it better for other people. And then that works. And one question might be, well, how well does it work? And the answer is, the only way that you can find out is by trying it. That's the existential element of it. The proof is to be derived by the incarnation of the attitude in your own life. No one can tell you how it will work for you. It's the thing that your destiny is to discover that. And you have to make the decisions to begin with. It's like, because you can't do this without commitment. You have to commit to it first. That's the act of faith that Kierkegaard was so insistent upon.
Dr. Peterson is now starting to talk about how there are some games that you really don't get to play unless you're all in. So think about, in the most microscopic level, going all in poker, right? You'll never know what it's like to go all in poker if you've never gone all in poker, right? It's a simple thing. Have you experienced X? Yes or no, then Y, right? It's that simple, right? Dr. Peterson's going to talk about marriage, and he's going to say that there are some games that you don't get to play unless you're all in, right? And he's talking specifically about marriage. And how can that be? The traditional idea of marriage, and let's talk about the predominant idea of marriage, the idea of marriage before you could say that we've bastardized it, especially recently, right? Now, marriage, even in the vows, it's written until death do us part, right? Death is like the ultimate finality, so marriage is supposed to last until you die, right? You're not supposed to quit and give up on each other. You're supposed to fight for each other, technically, no matter what. And Dr. Peterson will say, there's obviously exceptions to the rule. You don't know what it's like to go all in on a marriage unless you've ever gone all in a marriage. And you have to take a Kierkegaardian leap of faith to hope, to know, to think, to act in such a way. And all of those things have to work in unison in order to be successful. But you have to do all those things together in unison, being helped and being pushed by the belief, the creed, the morals, whatever you want to call it, the discipline, that you're not going to quit that marriage. You're not going to quit that commitment. You're going to go all in on that hand. You're going to play the game as hard as you can. And ultimately, if you don't play the game as hard as you can, you'll never know what it's like to play that game in your life with those rules that you set for yourself to be as successful as you can be.
You have to say, I'm going to act as if being is good. I'm going to act as if truth is the pathway to enlightenment. I'm going to act as if I should pursue the deepest meaning possible in my life.
It's important to note that when I talk about success, success is a metric that you have to set for yourself. Again, the framework of the game fits for so many things, because when he talks about the game, well, maybe the game is where I am today and where I want to be 5 years from now. And I need to set those rules of my game on how I'm going to be successful.
And there's reasons to do none of those. They're real reasons. So it's really a decision.
So Dr. Peterson says there's reasons to do none of those. So what could he possibly mean by that? Why wouldn't you want to play the most ambitious game? So we can look at an example, a real life example. We recently have somebody like Elon Musk, and I don't know or care how anybody feels about him. That's not the point. Well, we can't argue about that the man has been wildly successful, and a lot of it, if not most of it, has been because of himself. And that being said, we have individuals like Elizabeth Warren who basically call him a freeloader. My issue with that is, what we can't deny is that Elon Musk has poured his blood, sweat, and tears into his success and the success of his company.
But you can't find out what the consequence of the decision is unless you make the decision.
I once dated a girl, and she was very religious, and she would say things to me like, well, I just wish that I could know that you're the one. Sometimes in life you have to take a Kierkegaardian leap of faith. And if you're unwilling to do that, then you'll never know the outcome of the thing that you wanted. And sometimes the Kierkegaardian leap of faith is required for you to achieve the things that you want the most in life.
I think the same thing happens when you get married, by the way. So if you think you might leave, you're not married. And then you think, well, the marriage didn't succeed. It's like, well, maybe you were never married. Because the rule is, you don't get to leave. And there's a reason for that rule. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't situations where there should be exceptions made for that. That's not the point. The point is that there's some games you don't get to play unless you're all in. And the other thing that's so interesting about being alive is that you're all in. No matter what you do, you're all in. This is going to kill you. So I think you might as well play the most magnificent game you can while you're waiting. Because do you have anything better to do?